Hello, doom scribblers. We are still talking about dialogue. We've already established that dialogue is pushing forward the plot or the story and revealing character. If it's not doing those things, it should not be on the page. That's the function of dialogue in a novel. We are not going to have repetitive characters. Anybody who is repetitive, one, you are going to edit them down, or two, you're going to have your POV character say, you already said that, get to the point, what are you trying to say? Or you're going to have some kind of exposition, could be the interior monologue of the POV character that says some version of, Chris was eternally repetitive. It took him forever to get to the point. I listened to him for 5 solid minutes before he finally said, the bomb's in the suitcase. But you don't write over and over and over again the same thing from one character or the same thing from multiple characters. We're pushing things forward. There is propulsive motion. The other thing that we've established, but I'm going to repeat anyway, is that there is going to be tension between the speakers. Each speaker has got an agenda, and their agenda, whether it's overt or covert, is pushing forward whatever they say. In the chapter that I put up in the main room last week, you could see that we have this horsewoman who is the main POV character in that story thread, and her pregnant neighbor who are on horseback and going back to the farm. They are in conflict, even though they are both super polite middle-class ladies who want everything to be nice and lovely and don't mention the fact that the main character's vomit smells like whiskey. They are still in conflict and they still want different things. And you want that in your dialogue. You want tension and conflict in your dialogue. A new thing that I want to layer in that I think gets lost in a lot of television, certainly. Films not as much, and novels even less. But the power dynamic between speakers gets leveled. So if you watch a lot of television, there are a lot of really brave people who always go to the boss and absolutely speak their mind, particularly in American dramas. And that's just not the way the world is. And that's kind of fabulous. It's a form of wish fulfillment, is that people be completely upfront and straightforward speaking and say what they mean. I've talked about this before when I'm talking about dialogue. There is this wonderful expression, concept in Japanese called honnen tatemai. And honnen is what you personally feel, and tatemai is what you are obliged to say in order to keep peace, to maintain the wa of your group. And that's part of your responsibility, is to keep the peace. And so you go for dinner, lunch with your boss and your co-workers, and everyone hums and haws over the menu. And then your boss will say, you know what, I'm feeling like chicken katsu today. And then everyone says, oh, wow, that's a really good idea. It's a really good idea. Let's do that. And that's not because anybody is lying. It's not considered lying. It's considered good manners. The way you speak is culturally coded. And we are writing for an American audience. So you're going to find we've got a lot of non-American writers in the rooms. And you're going to find some of your stuff is going to get pulled back and rewritten in American, so that the kind of hedging, for example, that we do in British English will sound like a female speaker, even from a man's mouth. If you hedge as much as some speakers do in British English, that sounds like a woman speaking in American English. So you'll see me editing for that. I want to offer you another idea for looking at how your characters might interact with each other on the page, and that is transactional analysis. Go and look it up. It's really useful. So down and dirty basics. So Freud had this idea that there was a superego, an ego, and an id. And transactional analysis only deals with the ego part of that. And within the ego part, it's broken down into parent, child, adult, and that it's not id, superego, ego. All of it is from the ego state. And from the ego state, the speaker can be speaking depending on their relationship with the person that they're speaking to and what they're trying to communicate and their internal state in that moment. They can be speaking as a child, which would be in a subordinate position of non-power. They could be speaking as a parent, which is an authoritative top-down way of speaking, or as an adult, which is in neither up nor down, but speaking to somebody as an equal. And so I really recommend, I'm going to put a link in the comments, go and look up transactional analysis, because the idea is that your characters are always speaking to each other from one of these states. It is not equal. It is very rare that you get two characters who are speaking to each other adult to adult. We write like that a lot, unless we have children in the room, but we don't tend to get the nuanced stuff of power dynamics when a boss is a bad boss and speaks to their reports as if they're children and has this top-down way of speaking to them. But have a think about that when you're writing characters. We're writing extraordinarily fast chapters. We're writing with a lot of action and a lot of speed, but you still want to think about your characters being in conflict, and you still want to think about the hierarchical relationship between your characters. There are going to be other genres where it's more useful to think about transactional analysis, but I think it's a great way to think about the power dynamic between your speakers. We've got in books 1, we've got plenty of people who are in cars going places, and when they roll down the window and they are talking to a police officer and they could be taken to prison, which mode do you think they're in? Right? They are not necessarily going to be in, well, they're almost certainly not going to be in parent, because lecturing a police officer would be a really bad idea unless you're going for a shootout, in which case that could be a super interesting decision that you're going to make. Are they belligerent? Are they challenging? Are they going for that? Or are they going to take a more subservient approach? Are they going to actually back down and be more childlike and acquiescent? So something to think about. I am looking at time. We're doing pretty well on time. The other thing that I want to think about is when your characters are not saying what they mean. In first or close third, it is almost impossible for your POV character to have a secret, because we are inside their experience. So we know a lot about what they're thinking, and you can have great fun playing with what they're thinking and what they're saying not matching up. That's a really, really interesting thing for your readers to be riding along with, right? But we can't, as readers, actually have a secret from a POV character because we're inside their head. However, the other characters absolutely could have secrets. We've got a character in one book whose agenda is very, very clear to her. She doesn't want anyone else to know what her agenda is. And so she's going to be lying for an entire book. And we're not going to know. We're going to feel there's something weird. She's not the POV character, so she can have secrets because we're not inside her head. We can hear what she's saying. We can distrust what she's saying. We can have thoughts about what she's saying. What she says can not match up, not add up, not quite make sense. But she can have secrets. And at the end, there'll be a reveal where it works out she has been lying the entire time. So when you're writing dialogue, Depends what kind of writer you are. You might write fast and dirty and get everything down on the page that you need, and all of it is completely coherent and makes complete sense, and everybody speaks in full sentences and says everything that they mean, and then you pare it down so you get it down to just the thing they need to say. They don't need to say, yes, that's what I'm doing, I'm going to go and buy a cup of coffee. They just need to say yes, right? Because there's a conversation that's gone on before that when it's, are you going to go buy a cup of coffee? They don't answer by saying, yes, I'm going to go buy a cup of coffee. They answer by saying yes. So you pare it down, and then you make it idiosyncratic. You give it their voice, the way they say it, the way that only they can say it. And when you're really practiced at this, you could take a line of dialogue from your manuscript and feed it to somebody who knows your manuscript, and they could guess which character is speaking based on that line of dialogue. So have a think about whether your characters are telling the truth or lying, and what the reader can know about that, and how that can be useful for the drama. The other thing that I want you to think about is the kind of listeners that you have got, because speaking implies a listener, right? And we are tremendously bad listeners at this moment in history. We are very bad listeners. As a novelist, you have the great privilege of listening to people to hear what it is they're saying. I have always maintained that everyone is fascinating if you will but listen. Everyone has a story. Everyone has heartache. Everyone has been through the ringer. All you have to do is find the right way to ask the question and then listen. We didn't get to today because we are on 12 minutes already. We went from doing really well to now we're way long. We didn't get to talking about anxiety, ADHD, and dyspraxia, which are things that I do want to talk about, and I do want to talk about those kind of speakers and listening to those kind of speakers, but that's going to be in the next one. All right, Doom Scribblers, keep going. You're doing awesome.